All right, good Monday evening, Mid-Michigan. Chief Meteorologist Chris Easlick here with a quick update on the weather for you, and then we will get right to my interview with former TV5 reporter Rick Mixter, the full-length interview that we did just discussing the Edmund Fitzgerald because it is the 50th anniversary of the sinking, but did quickly want to show you the weather situation here while we wait for some folks to join the stream. We do have that winter weather advisory in Huron County that goes until roughly about midnight or so, unless the Weather Service decides to cancel it early. So things look like they're in pretty good shape right now as far as those bands pushing offshore. So glad we're finally getting a break there after some significant snow in portions of Huron County for today. If you have a weather question, I will see if I can answer that towards the end here, but I figure let's get right to the interview with Rick. There might be a quick echo at first because I want to make sure that we get the sound with the interview. And so let's, without further ado, go right to that. This year, we mark the 50th anniversary of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Calling in this morning to help us remember this tragic moment in Michigan history, we have Michigan shipwreck expert Rick Mixter, former TV5 reporter, and my go-to guy on any story like this. Rick, thank you for making time in your busy schedule for us. I know you have a ton to do as we get ready for that 50th celebration. So again, thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. To talk to my family at TV5 is always an honor.
So you are well versed in not only the Edmund Fitzgerald, but in shipwreck history around the state of Michigan. And it seems like you got your start with the Jupiter here in the TV5 area. And there are so many stories to tell on each one. But what do you think it is about the Fitzgerald that not only keeps yourself coming back for more, but also people around Michigan and the United States too?
It's a curse and it's a blessing. It's Gordon Lightfoot. It's absolutely the song that has turned people to look towards the lakes at this time period. The song always gets played more this time. And it's part of a curse because I think if people only see our November gales as being the 29 lost on the Fitzgerald, you're missing out on really 25,000 other people who've been lost in November gales. And that's really like your fascination with the weather. For me, it's very captivating to be able to go down and visit these vessels that were lost and remember the crew that were fighting so hard to survive.
The Edmund Fitzgerald has been visited by 5 different expeditions. 2 were by unmanned robots, and 3 more were by manned submersibles. The reason that divers don't visit this wreck is because it's extremely deep. Most divers only go to about 130 feet. Fitzgerald is in 500 feet of water, and to get an idea of how deep that is, 500 feet is from the tip of the Mackinac Bridge all the way down to the waters of the Straits of Mackinac.
And you were one of the few who has had the opportunity to dive the final resting place of the ship. I would imagine that was a very powerful experience, very interesting from a shipwreck perspective. But can you just describe all the feelings that came with that?
I would say it ran the entire gamut of every feeling you can have. You know, the expectation of trying to get to, you've seen the submarine, the nervousness of hoping the submarine is a good submarine. And of course, we never questioned that. Bob Ballard had dove in the Delta just before us when he dove the Lusitania. So we were very, excited about that. It was very exciting to dive the largest shipwreck in the Great Lakes, the one that had the song written about its loss. And then when we started finding personal effects on the bottom, screwdrivers used by the engineers on board and the oilers, and blankets and coffee cups that were used by the crew and the cook that was lost, Bob Rafferty, it just really at that point started to really bring us down as we realized this is where 29 people were lost.
Yeah, and I can relate to that a little bit when it comes to the weather because you go to school and you study tornadoes, you study hurricanes, and you're interested in that. But there's also that human element that comes out, when you hear a damage report from a tornado. And for you, I would imagine it was that same feeling when you saw some of those artifacts that were left behind.
And you're kind of, you're guarded because I've spent 30 years in television news. I've talked to people at their lowest point when they've lost loved ones in fires and, dog attacks and car crashes. And you get prepared for that. But to go down to a gravesite and then to ultimately find one of the sailors that were lost down there still wearing a life jacket, you're presented with all kinds of other emotions and challenges ethically for what you should show and what you shouldn't show to tell that story. And I'll tell you, it ran the gamut for the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Yeah, and many may not know that the wreckage is considered a grave site for the crew, and I believe it's considered a protective site by the Canadian government, and there are some restrictions, and it requires a permit. You would probably know better than I on that. But do you think as time goes on, more dives will happen as curiosity grows, as we start to get better technology? Or do you think this is one of those wrecks that will largely be left alone from here on out?
Well, it's a misnomer to call it a gravesite. In fact, the Canadian ministry fought against calling it a gravesite because they know that people can go and visit gravesites. If you think of the 7 million people who go to visit the Arizona Memorial at Honolulu, Hawaii, we know that these are important places. 500,000 people went to see where the 9/11 crash occurred in Pennsylvania last year alone. So gravesites can be visited. So they fought to really talk about it being a gravesite. It's been consecrated by family members, but the real restriction becomes to the popularity of diving at shipwreck and the real probability that people would try to steal things off the shipwreck. The bell has come up, pellets have been illegally taken off the shipwreck. So there's been some of that already. And the Canadian government really fought to seal it off for that reason. The bodies, we have many bodies on the Kamloops, the Emperor, so many of the shipwrecks, the Superior City, the ones we discover recently have bones on them as well. They're all very important grave sites, but we're not restricted in diving those. So I see a time when the Fitzgerald will be opened up, and I'll get a lot of pushback, especially from my friends at the museum where I'm on the board of directors. They do not want to see that, and I understand that, but I will be the voice of reason when it comes to talking about shipwrecks and the reality of what happens. Typically, people don't worry about shipwrecks when they're over 50 years old, and that was the legislation that Michigan tried to pass and ultimately did, but it was struck down after they figured that you can't restrict people on what they can film in American waters. And so it's kind of silly how we've overreacted on this, but ethically, you also don't want to hurt people's feelings, and I'm challenged with that. I really am, and that's why we haven't seen any close-ups from the body footage that we recorded. It just never happened. Even the guy, I have no copy of that footage. The guy that owned it passed away, never, ever sold it. So the headlines that came out when we discovered the first crewmen were cruel, and they called us pirates, and it never came to be. So I think that we stand proud at telling the story and telling the whole story. And that's been difficult to do when we know that it does still hurt people 50 years after the loss.
Yeah, valuable perspective there. Now, you have not only, anybody can go on Wikipedia, anybody can, get the basic information about this wreck, but you've done extensive research. You have talked to a lot of people over the years. In all of your research and interaction with perhaps other enthusiasts or even relatives of the crew, and I think you've even talked to people who worked on the Fitzgerald before the wreck actually happened. Is there anything that you have learned that may not be as well known to people who haven't researched as much as you have? Perhaps something that goes deeper than just the standard information that we have?
It's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but Gordon Lightfoot's song is 90% wrong. There's no Chippewa legend of Lake Gitchagumi not giving up its dead. The old cook wasn't on board the ship. It wasn't coming from some mill in Wisconsin. There are no mills in Wisconsin. It wasn't fully loaded. It wasn't going to Cleveland. All of this stuff, I think, crushes a lot of people's spirit. Our dive proved the ship did not dive in one piece to the bottom, which is what the museum and so many other people still propagate. This is a shoal that doesn't exist. I've talked to the people that were on board the Bayfield that went and measured the water where this fake 6-fathom shoal existed. It doesn't exist. The Coast Guard didn't believe it. The first mate of the Anderson that followed the Fitzgerald doesn't believe it. So I think I bring a perspective that maybe ruins a lot of the the hallmark kind of version that we have of the Fitzgerald. It was the captain that ran that ship into the ground. It was the hatches that weren't dogged down. And I've got dozens of photographs to prove not only how she lies on the bottom, but pictures of the ship in storm and movies in the storm that they didn't dog those hatches down. So it's not popular. I think it opens that wound again for family members. It certainly makes me mad at Gordon Lightfoot for changing the lyrics that the hatches didn't collapse in. But I've got proof. I was at hatch 1. I was at hatch 6. They collapsed in. It's the absolute truth, and I've got photographic and video proof of it.
Yeah, and so you kind of went into my next question, and we talked years ago. I think this was even before the pandemic happened, so it's been at least, I think, about 5 years. But back then, you had told me that it's been hard to find agreement as to what actually caused the ship to go down. There's a lot of different opinions. So now that time has passed since we last talked, and technology has gotten better, have you found there might be a growing consensus now, or do you still think there are some really stubborn opinions that that's just going to be, for a lack of a better way of putting it, that's just the way I'm going to view this, and it probably won't change many opinions?
You will find a clear division behind the people who feel a tragic loss even 50 years later of those crew members, and how they will not go against anybody that was on that crew. The captain's decision to cut overtime to not put the hatches down, the deckhands that didn't seal all of those hatches because they were ordered not to. All of those people, whoever, feels closest to the families, will take that line that it ran aground, it was the captain's fault, and that's it. If you go to the people who I think are scholarly about this and who look at the facts and who have seen my lectures, nobody leaves my lecture thinking that ship ran aground. So I think that literally the answer's there. It's what version of that you like and makes you feel better at the end of the day. And I'm good with that. I think, I'm not 100% on anything, but I do know the things that did happen and the things that didn't happen. And it's all clear in my book and my DVDs.
Well, lastly, you've given us a lot of great information so far, and I know you're a busy guy with all of your talks coming up, so I don't want to spoil everything of your talk, so we'll leave a little bit to be desired. I would imagine your schedule's pretty full. Do you have any talks locally in the TV5 viewing area coming up? And you've also written your book, Tattletale Sounds. Where can people find your talks, and where can they find your book?
I always have a fantastic, the first lecture in Bay County for the second Saturday series at the Bay County Museum. Midland is coming up very soon, though. I'll be talking about the Edmund Fitzgerald, the Dow Library. I'll make sure I give you a date on that. Every time I come home to the Tri-Cities where my kids were raised, it's a special time to come back. So I'm always looking for invites as well. And certainly the Fitzgerald season is busy. I'll definitely be in Duluth. Tomorrow I fly to Duluth. I go to Superior, Wisconsin, but I always have time to come home.
And we always appreciate that. So, Rick, again, with the 50th, we know you're busy. You're busy all the time, but I'm sure it's a little bit more this year. So we always thank you for making time for us in your schedule, and thanks for doing this for us.
Oh, thanks for keeping it in a weather perspective as well. It's so important, and hopefully we'll inspire that next generation of meteorologists and perhaps historians as well. That's really my goal.
All right, that concludes the interview with Rick Mixter. I got to mute the TV now that that interview is over. Hopefully you find that interesting and a different perspective. Rick is always helpful to us here at TV5 when it comes to anything shipwrecks. And the one thing that I have learned from Rick over the years is there isn't just the Fitzgerald. It is a significant event. It is a very interesting story and, of course, a tragic event all in its own. But he's also told me a lot of things about other shipwrecks over the years. And so hopefully we can do more with Rick here in the future. Did want to give you a quick update as we were going through that interview. The winter weather advisory for Huron County, which was scheduled to go until midnight, has now been allowed to expire early. We do have some snow showers that are still present just offshore in Lake Huron, but it seems like that northwesterly wind is finally pushing those out to the open water and no longer causing at least a widespread issue in the thumb. If we jump over to the traffic map really quick, just to give a sense of some of the traffic speeds, we do have reduced travel speeds through portions of Huron and also Sanilac County. Waiting to get some final numbers, but that lake effect band that has been passing through Huron County at times today did report about 7.5 inches in Ubley at last check. That was closer to about 6 o'clock for our later show of the early evening newscast, and then we got a report of about 5 inches in Bad Axe. I'm guessing those may not be current anymore, or there may be a little bit added to that. So if that's unofficial, that's why those reports were given to us much earlier. A little too early to say, I think, as far as any schools tomorrow in Huron County. Mostly because this event is winding down now. So road crews are going to have some time to work through the night. We'll see if that is good enough for those students to get to school tomorrow. But I would say, is it a 100% chance that they're going to school? I don't think so. We had some schools delayed and closed earlier today, not many, but there were a few, and some black ice was certainly possible. And once you get out to Huron County, of course, you have a lot of back roads, and any side streets in town likely going to be pretty icy as well, or any untreated roads, whether it's a back road, regular road, or otherwise. Anything that is untreated tonight that is still wet by the time we really cool off. Definitely going to be a little bit dicey tomorrow morning. The rest of the week, we will just skip ahead a little bit. And then if you have any other weather questions, I will answer them off stream. But here's a look at your 7-day forecasts. There it is, popping up now. We do warm up towards Thursday and Friday, so any snow that still remains. I know we did a lot of melting today in areas that had a lot of sun, but going towards the end of the week, that snow will pretty much be history. And as we head into the weekend, it appears that we're going to add some rain on top of that. And then early next week on Monday, looks like we'll have a chance to stay on the milder side of things, at least compared to what we've been going through the last couple of days. So any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I'll take a look at those, or any comments on the interview if you found it interesting or anything like that. Otherwise, we will end the stream here, and we will talk to you tomorrow at 9 o'clock.